Do you know someone who you respect for their intelligence who just doesn't like Chesterton? They think he's too playful, kind of annoying. They can appreciate him, but they don't enjoy reading him. And what do you think of such people?
Yeah, I have met a few of those, and usually they haven't read enough Chesterton to have properly made that conclusion. That's how I feel, that they've encountered bits and pieces. They may have read Orthodoxy or Everlasting Man, maybe. But, you know, books like that you can't read just once. You have to read them again, and that's when they start bearing fruit, is about on the third reading. Because the second time you read them is the most uncanny experience in the world, Matt, because G.K. Chesterton is one of the only writers who can rewrite a book after you've read it the first time, and then when you read it the second time, he's somehow come out of the grave and rewritten the book.
What does that mean?
It's because you're reading this book that you've even underlined yourself, and you say, "I've never read this before.
That was not there.
That was not there before."
I'm sure of it. I see.
Someone has rewritten the lines on top of what I underlined, and I don't know how they did that, but it's a completely new book the second time you read it.
So he kind of writes with an accessibility that might be deceptive at first, kind of like Plato, honestly. You know, when you read Aristotle, you're kind of smacked in the face with all this jargon that you need to sort through. Plato, I feel like you pick Plato up, read the Apology or something like that, and you kind of get it. But there's a depth there that you, I guess, might spend a long time then excavating.
Because when you read the Apology the second time, there's stuff I didn't see that the first time I read this. So yeah, Chesterton is ever new. He's really an evergreen writer, where you're always going to get something out of the same text that you've already read before. And so reading Chesterton that first time, I was hooked. I just kept reading more and more. I had to comb through used bookstores at that point and find as many books as I could. And then slowly discovered that there were one or two people out there in the world who also were reading Chesterton. And
before the internet existed, you couldn't find them in little
and there was just there were very few people who were reading them, and those who were reading would kind of keep it a secret. They didn't want anyone to know, especially if they were teachers or professors.
Why?
Because Chesterton was not someone that you was taken seriously at all in the early 80s. So this is the end of the dark ages. No one was reading Chesterton in the 70s, and almost no one in the 80s. And then slowly people started coming out of the closet because we started finding each other. And
why didn't they take him seriously?
Well, as we were talking about, he was considered too flippant, too paradoxical, just dismissed because of his paradoxes. He thought those were just rhetorical tricks.
He's being cute.
Yeah. And it's not seeing how profound he was. And also, Chesterton was writing against every philosopher that they were reading and taking seriously. I mean, he had taken apart Nietzsche, during when people were still discovering Nietzsche in the early 20th century, and just showing what an abysmal and vapid philosophy it was, and pointing out the madness of it. And he was pointing out all the madness of all modern philosophy, how that if you take it to its logical conclusion, it will lead to the madman's cell. That's the chapter in Orthodoxy. The clean, well-lit prison of one idea.
Oh, that's good.
And but not only madness, but self-destructive madness. That every one of these modern philosophies holds the seeds to its own downfall and its own destruction. And Chesterton pointed out all these things 20, 30, 40 years before anybody realized it. And then when they started taking him seriously again, then late 80s, they realized, he might have been onto something.
So maybe it was a combination of his apparent flippancy coupled with the fact that he's taking down philosophers who it was in vogue to be following at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was certainly there. And I think one of the great tributes recently paid to Chesterton was Peter Kreeft's 4-volume collection of the 100 greatest philosophers, Plato's Children, and number 100 is G.K. Chesterton.
Yeah. You know Peter?
I do, yes. I had the great blessing of knowing him.
I bet you guys would have some good conversations.
Well, I try to listen to him. We have good conversations in that I listen to him talk, yes, because why would I say anything?
He's one of the most lighthearted, genuinely humble, joyful men I've ever met.
Truly.
And at that age, 85 now?
Yeah, he's eternally
I'm grumpy at 40. And we picked him up from the airport, brought him to the studio in Atlanta where I used to live. We got stuck in traffic on the way back. and it looked like he was going to miss his flight. And the whole time he was just telling jokes and you got to watch this movie.
Yeah. So Chesterton played a role in his conversion too. Chesterton played a role in Peter Kreeft's conversion. Right? Yeah.
And I've heard the story about the Church Fathers.
Yeah, the Church Fathers, of course, the big one. But you know, he was he liked those 19th century philosophers too when he was studying philosophy, and he particularly liked Kierkegaard. Okay. And interestingly enough, I did my master's thesis on Kierkegaard and Chesterton and the concept of paradox in both writers. So when he talked to me about his affinity for Kierkegaard, I lit up because I had the same affinity for both writers. But he said that Kierkegaard, he said, might have been enough to keep him a Protestant. Okay. But Chesterton answered all of Kierkegaard's questions. Wow. So that was a nice tribute from Peter Kreeft to G.K. Chesterton.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.